Luke looked like a blonde Elvis Presley. And I've always loved Elvis, but I never quite managed to love Luke. There were things in that boy's head that were dark. Fucking nightmare dark. And the only ways he seemed to have of escaping them were hard liquor, hot women, and a constantly buzzing sphere of friends. If Luke thought someone was boring, or even worse, too sober, he would raise hell about it. Once he'd literally set a guy on fire for boring him in a pub. There's a lot the world doesn't see. A lot I didn't see. Luke wasn't just the borderline alcoholic fuckboy everyone expected. His prime drive in life was a savior complex a mile wide. That was the darkness that was eating him alive. So hello, you wonderful human of the internet, and welcome to the next chapter of the Nostalgia Project. As usual, if you haven't seen the previous chapters, it is not desperately important. I will link the playlist below, but you can jump in at any point with these stories, really. So yeah, this chapter is about 2005, when I dated what these days would be termed a fuckboy. He was about the most notorious fuckboy of the Birmingham goth scene, and yet I turned into the asshole in the situation because he ended up falling in love with me, and I did something very bad indeed. Be intrigued to hear if anyone else has ever had this thing where you date someone and you just think, can't trust this guy. And you come to learn that there's a lot beneath the surface, because there was a lot beneath this guy's surface. But anyway, that's for the story. So without further ado, this chapter is called The Fuckboy Who Fell in Love, and here we go. Luke looked like a blonde Elvis Presley, especially while he was fucking you. Eyes narrowed, lips all pouty, bleached hair flopping down into his blue eyes. It was literally like getting fucked by Elvis. And I've always loved Elvis, but I never quite managed to love Luke. The depressing thing is, I reckon I could have loved him, would have loved him, and maybe even should have loved him if it hadn't have been for his reputation. Everyone on the scene knew Luke fucked anything that moved, had been with every single one of the top 50 hottest UK goth girls, if such a list existed, and I suspect that list did exist on a scribbled pad somewhere beneath Luke's well-used bed, and therefore he could be linked to any goth in the country through the gothic sex web, as Luke laughingly put it. Basically, you connect any couple who've ever fucked, spreading the web outwards through every sexual connection, past or present. Welcome to the gothic sex web. Once you fucked Luke, you might as well have fucked the whole of England. I knew all of this from the minute I got with him, which was barely a month after I stopped fuck buddying Ricky. My emotions had been locked down tight all year, guarding like barbed wire against feeling further affection for a sociopath, and now I was dating the scene's most infamous fuckboy. What would you do? I did what any sane person would. I locked my heart, then threw away the key. By the time I realised Luke was, for once in his life, actually serious, it was far too late. I couldn't fish those emotions back out. I'd simply never seen that Luke, somewhere beyond the blonde Elvis notorious shagger exterior, actually did have a heart, and that heart was busy falling so deeply in love with me. He was genuinely considering changing careers to bring in the extra finances needed to support someone so young and dysfunctional. But in all my autistic obliviousness, I never saw that. Not till it was all far too late. The first times Luke and I really hung out properly outside of nightclubs, it was all thanks to drugs. He was 27 now to my 20. Most of his friends were settling down and having babies. It was hard for him to score anymore, and thus I became the link in the chain between Luke's party monster friends and Rasta Mark, passing on my connections and occasionally ferrying the goods to parties, which, by the way, is something I strongly recommend you never fucking do. It's bad enough risking being caught with a personal stash. A whole party's worth of coke could put you in jail for the rest of your stupid sodding life. And when Luke's friend and prior source John found out I was doing that shit for free, he gave me a right talking to. We were hanging out in a darkened corner of the House of Goth, that quintessential Birmingham goth scene party house of the 2000s. Both our skinny asses squeezed into the same 90s floral armchair. I had a raging crush on John, not that I'd ever let it slip. He was dating Luke's housemates and I was dating Luke. But John, with his skinny frame and pretty face, mischievous sense of humour, speed habit and baggy rave pants, he was exactly my thing. He had this endearingly paranoid habit of talking at parties with one hand cupped around his mouth, just in case someone was watching and attentively lip-reading. Well, like I said, he was a speed freak. Paranoia's unavoidable. I was still convinced my friends were bugging my car with invisible radios. Who was I to judge? And in this nestled close, fervently whispered manner, John said, look, you don't take those kinds of risks for free, all right? Charge them an extra quid on every pill and do not do mates rates on coke anymore. Just tell them the prices went up on your end. These fuckers can afford it. Which is precisely what I did, and rapidly ended up with a raging coke habit due to the powdery white proceeds. Luke's gang worked hard and played harder. They had a serious weekend affection for nose candy. Luke was a social animal in the extreme, couldn't stand a second's silence, a single moment of being alone. There were things in that boy's head that were dark, fucking nightmare dark. And the only ways he seemed to have of escaping them were hard liquor, hot women, and a constantly buzzing sphere of friends. If Luke thought someone was boring, or even worse, too sober, he would raise hell about it. Once he'd literally set a guy on fire for boring him in a pub. Apparently he'd only intended to singe the guy's hair, but instead his victim had gone up like a torch. I shouldn't even be laughing. Emerging from the fireball more or less bald. Naturally, this became one of Luke's favourite stories, and Luke had a lot of stories. This was his mantra, actually, whenever it came to a stupid decision or a huge, daunting chore. Do it for the story. He was a writer on the side of his day job. Naturally, he was his own main character. And the stuff he came out with was brilliant. I hadn't even started writing back then, didn't have the first clue what I wanted to do with my life. Luke thought I should combine my personal history with my passions and start a writing program for eating disordered girls. He always dreamed big, and he always dreamed compassionate. 16 years later, Luke hasn't published a single word of those brilliant life stories, which is a tragedy. But he has produced a child he dotes on more than any father I've ever known. And instead, I'm the one sitting here writing about him and myself as a main character. Weird how things change. He still does it for the story, though, Luke, whether it's climbing trees to rescue cats like a gothy fireman Sam, or tending to roadside casualties the rest of the world pretends it didn't see. There's a lot the world doesn't see. A lot I didn't see. Luke wasn't just the borderline alcoholic fuckboy everyone expected. His prime drive in life was a saviour complex a mile wide. That was the darkness that was eating him alive. Luke wanted to save everyone, see? Everyone but himself, anyway. Why the hell do you think he chose me? Visibly underweight, covered in self-harm scars, I was his perfect project. His perfect stand-in for the girl that haunted his nightmares. Because once upon a time, when he'd been nothing more than a weedy 15-year-old kid, Luke hadn't been able to save the girl he loved from the most awful shit you can possibly imagine. Even though it was over a decade ago, whenever Luke got drunk, really, really drunk, which was often, he'd curl up in a ball on the bed and slurrily berate the shit out of himself for failing her, not getting her out of there sooner, even though he'd gone above and beyond by about 7,000 miles to my eyes. Even if he'd been an adult, the things Luke did to save that girl would have been worthy of an epically dark superhero movie. And to think of a 15-year-old, any 15-year-old, taking on the world like that, it was genuinely terrifying. Is she okay now, though? I asked the third time he really felt a bits on me, drunk to the nth degree after we crashed in from a house party. Has she managed to move on from that? Yeah, he conceded with definite reluctance. He really did like a good brood. It's not the point, though, is it? I should have been able to stop it. Luke, it was 12 years ago and she's completely fine now. You're the one who's not. Why won't you go to therapy about this? Pfft, came the dismissive reply from the shadow across the bed. Wouldn't work for me. I don't do therapy. I'm talking to you. It's fine. I'm not a fucking psychologist, Luke. I don't know what to say, and I'm clearly not helping you. We had this exact conversation last weekend, and the shadow on the bed stumbled to its feet, crashed over to the computer, put on Send in the Clowns, and passed out in a puddle of beer, leaving me to sleep curled up like a dog on the beer-soggied left-hand corner of the bed. I didn't realise it back then, given I barely drank, but I get it now. Luke had the kind of alcohol tolerance that meant he could still be standing, talking, and basically functional, but he would have no memory whatsoever of the event by the next day. That was why I could never help him. I was talking to dead brain cells, trying to head shrink someone who might as well have been unconscious. In the end, I stopped even trying to talk him down and just let him listen to his dismal music and bemoan the past to his bedside lamp. I wish I could tell you what it was Luke did to the guy who was hurting that girl. I nearly threw up and passed out when he told me. That guy committed suicide in the end. That's how the girl finally got saved. And maybe this is why there was a palpable aura of ungodly darkness that surrounded Luke whenever he got angry or drunk. He hadn't taken a life, but he'd come damn near close. And I have never, ever in my life felt a vibe as thick, black, and terrifying as Luke's when he was angry, even if he was hiding it in every other way. It was like this cloud of menace swirling around him, though any onlooker would see nothing more than a polite conversation. Right after I broke his heart, I got this run of bad luck that was crazy beyond words. When I told Ash, he immediately asked if Luke practiced witchcraft. I said no, taken aback. Luke was a staunch atheist, thought it was bullshit stupid to believe in anything at all, but to this day, I'm convinced he has abilities even he isn't aware of. Things happen for Luke. Things manifest. If you piss him off, something dark will come your way. And it doesn't matter a single bit that he isn't sitting inside a circle of human blood chanting satanic shit. He doesn't even need to. The last time I saw him, things hadn't been going great in his life, and much as I wanted to catch up, the sheer tarry blackness of his presence, his energy, scared me a mile away. And that was long, long before I even believed in such things. Back in 2005, though, it wasn't all darkness. Every night we'd shoot the shit with his housemates over several lines of coke plus a bottle or three of red wine. Then we'd curl up in bed together and watch Angel. Luke was obsessed with the Buffyverse. We all were in those days. But Angel's damned, brooding anti-hero really resonated with Luke and his saviour complex. And when he found out I'd barely seen any of it, he went on a quest to educate me. Even now, hearing that melancholic orchestral theme, it zaps me back there every time, cuddled up under Luke's rumpled duvet, and how safe the world felt. That was the beautiful thing about being with him. I always felt so safe. He was 7 years older, he knew how the world worked so much more than I did, and he was a proficient kickboxer. Suddenly, it didn't matter how spangled I got at nightclubs or where we ventured in the city, because I always knew Luke could keep me safe. Lying in bed on a Sunday night watching Angel, it was all reflected right there in its unfathomable, brooding anti-hero and the chaotic underworld always made better by friends and witty quips. It was just an elevated version of Luke's world. Pretty soon, the weekends took on a predictable but blissful routine. A poker game on Friday, all of us dressed as gangsters. Johnny Cash's maudlin fuck-it-all baritone rumbling wryly out of the speakers. Heaps of cocaine, Jack Daniels and stacks of cash on the table. Everyone verbally ripping each other a new asshole with each turn of the cards. On Saturdays, we'd hit the goth club. I'd drop pills, Luke would get drunk, then we'd come home. And while he was passed out in a booze coma, I'd consume every drug known to man and roll around his bedroom in the semi-darkness, having my own private after-party till the sun came up. I'd walk down Kingsheath High Street in the grey early morning light, buy a pack of Marlboro menthols and a chocolate milkshake, and just sit on the pavement to smoke up and enjoy the rising sun. People looked at me like a homeless freak show, and I didn't care a bit. Finally, the weekend was rounded off by Pizza Sundays when half of King's Heath seemed to flock to Luke's place for the stack of takeaway pizza, movies, more cocaine and red wine. Then we'd flop into bed, fuck, watch Angel and fall asleep exhausted and happy. Those Pizza Sundays, they were the final nail in the coffin for my eating disorder. When I met Luke, I was still rigidly counting calories and couldn't for a second understand how anyone ate a chocolate bar. Just picked it up off a shelf and ate it without counting the calories, then removing something from their diet to compensate later? How and why the hell did anyone do that? Sometimes I tried to eat chocolate, browsed the shelves for 10 minutes or more, calculating calories and what I'd have to do, miss out on to stick to my daily total. Every damn time I would finally conclude that no chocolate on earth was worth a whole meal's worth of calories when it didn't fill you up, and there was just too much choice. It was impossible to pick out just one anyway. But once I met Luke, there were wine calories and his homemade egg fried rice and pizza sundaes. I didn't even know how many calories were in that stuff, and that made it easier. His friends were so normal about eating, and like I said, they were allergic to boring people. Remember the guy Luke set on fire for that very sin? There was no way among this crew that I could just order a salad and stick to it without being the butt of the joke for the entire night. So I sucked it up and ate my fucking pizza. And it felt great. I gained weight, obviously, up to a level I'd never reached in my life, and was increasingly uncomfortable about that. Sometimes Luke and I fought about it, but never hard enough to break us up. My life with him was far more fun than my eating disorder, no matter how much the beast in my head raged about the weight gain. So I guess things seemed blissful, right? We'd been together 6 months now, over New Year and well into 2006. And Luke had started saying the occasional, "I love you." I don't recall what I said in return. It wasn't, thanks. I'm not quite that bad, but I think I went with, "I like you a lot too." Yeesh. It's not much better, is it? But for me, the age gap, not to mention the heavy drinking, was starting to strain. Luke had been everywhere, done everything before he met me. That made me feel safe at first, but safe can be so, well, not boring. Luke could never ever be boring. But he was patronising, often and intensely. And deep down, I yearned for someone my own age, someone who would be an equal, not a superior, someone who would experience new things at my side with the right kind of wonder, the way it had been with Ash. I wanted someone who appreciated the same drugs, instead of being on such different chemical wavelengths all the time. And I wanted someone who did not constantly poke fun at my vegetarianism. That was a pretty sore point. Anytime I caught a cold, Luke would harp on and on that it was because I needed bacon. I'd seen enough documentaries on the meat industry to know how evil it was, but Luke just did not care, and he did not know when to shut up and leave it. And so my inner voice got snarkier and snarkier every time I climbed into my little green Clio to drive over to Luke's house. And with every turn of the wheels, we got closer to the most cruel thing I have ever done. I swear I never meant it to go down like that. I knew on some level that I wanted someone different, someone other than Luke. But I never knew back then how to end it with a person after 6 months. Dumping someone was so confrontational, and I was such a people pleaser. It would always seem like it came out of the blue. So how and where did I even begin that conversation? I didn't know. But ultimately, I figured, did it really matter? I didn't love Luke, but I liked my life with him a lot. We were still having fun. Wasn't that enough? Mostly? I guess I forgot about the flick knife gift. I already told you, remember? Those of us who can take all the drugs in the world and they only make us colder, more calculating. And while the hearts of those around us grow softer, ours harden into serrated blades. I hadn't stabbed anyone yet, but when two people are partying together every weekend, when they want such opposite things and one of them has a blade for a soul, well, things get bloody. It all began with another party at the House of Goth where people didn't usually do drugs besides weed because the whole scene was present and some of them were vocally anti-drug. But of booze, there was plenty, often way, way too much. Bizarre cocktails in huge bowls sat in the busy, chatty kitchen, fancier ones cooked up by the elegant vamp goth crew who always laid claim to the small centre room, mixing away and discussing the perfect white Russian, with their long black hair, frilly shirts and overgrown aristocratic nails. You'd bring your own booze too, some cheapo plonk white wine or vodka. It was a requirement for entry. And of course, us being us, we snuck in a good few grams of cocaine. This time, though, it was a batch of the stuff that was definitely dodgy, far speedier, more aggressive than coke ever ought to be. We all became cold, bitter, glaring machines, emotions dead, drowned out by that numbing white powder. By midnight, Luke was as wasted as usual, and this time so was his friend Des, his giant frame lumbering up the stairs ahead of me, leading the way as we escaped the anti-drug crew to do more coke in the upstairs hallway. I was sitting with one of the girls in Luke's group, chatting away till Des and Luke got into a pissing contest about fuck knows what. I mean, literally, I do not even remember. It was such a petty little thing. But I can tell you it was something utterly childish, something they both would have brushed off like dust on any normal day, and yet, driven on by cocaine and macho posturing, for the first time, I saw their comical snarking and fun-poking get serious, really serious. As their voices grew angrier, snappier, their words meaner, the girl on the step beside me threw me a look like it was my place to intervene, to be the voice of reason. But I was on exactly the same cold, cruel, dodgy batch cocaine. And I just rolled my eyes at her, at Luke, at the whole damn thing. Why the fuck should I have to stick my neck out for my drunken mess of a boyfriend, who was being frankly ridiculous anyway? Fuck him. Fuck them all. I wasn't turning into one of those poor bloody girls who spend their entire life hollering, "He ain't worth it, Trev, he ain't worth it," then crying my eyes out as they pummeled each other into drunken bits. Stuff that. If they wanted to behave like children, someone else was being their fucking mother. That was when Luke slipped in the lowest of low blows, a dig at Dez's weight and single status, that he would always be single and alone and sad because he was a big fat lump. Luke's eyes were black as coal as he spat that one out, and then all hell broke fucking loose. The time for words was over. Des charged across the hall, an enraged rhinoceros, and with the full force of momentum behind his 400 pounds of coked-up aggression, he walloped Luke right in the eye socket, laying him a volley of the most violent punches I've ever witnessed in real life. It didn't even matter that Luke was a kickboxer. He was drunk, sitting down, and taken completely by surprise. As Des continued the pummeling and Luke scrabbled to regain the upper hand, I genuinely thought they were going to kill each other. and I still couldn't be fucking arsed having anything to do with it. They were behaving like toddlers, and after that disgusting jibe, what the fuck did Luke expect? But his friends were around. They always were. Luke was the magnet that held that group together like a swarm around him, so someone dragged them apart. As soon as a path was cleared through the violence, I got up and stalked off downstairs to find some actual grown-ups to talk to, utterly blanking Luke as I stepped over his legs, bar to shoot him a brief glance of total contempt. Was this the time I should have broken up with him? A very direct person would probably say yes, but wouldn't that literally be kicking someone when they were down? So I went home pretty soon after, Luke's home, that is, and was nearly asleep by the time I heard the front door crash open, followed by staggering footsteps, then a lot of very loud puking. Luke never ever puked. I can only guess he had a concussion, and who the hell wouldn't after taking a furious 400-pound Des to the head? It's awful, but even then, I couldn't give a shit. I just physically couldn't. When Luke finally came to bed, he wouldn't stop drunkenly groping me, getting more and more forceful, half pinning me down with his lead-heavy, boozed-up body weight, till I violently extracted myself and slept on the living room couch. In the morning, he had a black eye that was swollen nearly shut like a boxer. I still couldn't find much sympathy for this stupidity wound, but at least he had the decency to apologise to Des. Of course they got over it. Everyone had been high, shit happens. It clearly wasn't the first time that shit had happened, but I never wanted to see it again. There was nothing sexy about guys so lacking in class, eloquence and emotional intellect they ended up brawling like drunken walruses. It was a perfectly awful setup, because the thing is, the parties weren't even over. Not for that long, disastrous bank holiday weekend. There was one more, and it was Luke's. Specifically, as my patience wore dangerously thin, tomorrow was Luke's 28th birthday party. I suspect you can guess where it all went as I drove the 30-mile round trip back to Rasta Marks to load up on more coke, Luke's birthday card lying on the passenger seat next to me, but the details. The details are what made the knife so sharp, each word a barbed serration, each fresh disaster a twist of the blade. I'll tell you everything, I swear, but let me explain, let me get there. Everyone has to wait for their birthday. Oh, she'll break hearts when she's older, my Auntie Shirley once said, when I was just 6 years old, maybe 7. I liked that as I smiled up at her from knee height. It sounded powerful. Beauty, this thing I was suddenly being told I had. It was going to mean power when I was older. It was a kind of currency. Even then I could work that out. It was something even money couldn't buy. Not back in 1991, long before the Kardashians made beauty every bit as much a purchasable commodity as new knickers or Tupperware. I thought about that power, thought about it a lot, but I never thought about the boys or girls whose hearts I might be breaking. It never crossed my mind that I wouldn't be some evil queen cackling over formaldehyde jars of bloodied, still pumping organs. I didn't know that breaking hearts could feel awful, even when you were the one doing it. Luke's birthday was a dress-up affair. Of course, he loved costumes. This time we were all going as animals. I was a very predictable cat. Like most of the girls, it was easy and cute. Who doesn't fancy a cat girl? Luke, still sporting his swollen black eye and concussion, was working around his wounds and going as a badger. He painted right over that black eye, then blacked up the other to match, painted black streaks into his bleached hair. We spent the day trawling tediously around fancy dress and party shops for the snacks, balloons and final touches to the house. Then we waited in the huge living room for the partygoers to arrive. As soon as people were pouring through the front door and the music got cranked up, I ate a decent dose of the MDMA crystals left over from a prodigiously wasted night out some weeks back. But when I came up so hard I could barely communicate, I hid in the bathroom snorting coke to bring me back down again. But the coke I was on that night, it was the same awful shit we'd taken at the House of Goth. That same dodgy batch that made you cruel, emotionless, or outright violent if you were Luke and Des. I became an untethered ship, giving no fucks about anyone or anything. The flick knife inside my soul slid dangerously close to the surface. The house was packed out with people in every room spilling out into the garden, and the party went on all night, fueled by uppers and booze. I spent most of the time upstairs with the core of Luke's weed aficionado crew. Luke himself was downstairs in the kitchen with his fellow booze people, while the pillheads were all upstairs with me in a fug of smoke, deep-talking for hours. Round 5 a.m, I finally headed to bed, Luke's downstairs bedroom having been kept the one and only party-free zone on my insistence. I smudged off my makeup, stuffed in earplugs in an attempt to block out the ongoing party cacophony, and just as I was falling into, well, not sleep, that would be ambitious on this much coke, but I was starting to zone out, drift into the daydreamy grey zone that's about the best you can get on a heavy weekend. The door crashed open. It was Luke, still fully painted up as a badger, so drunk he could barely stand, and he crawled onto the bed next to me. It was officially his birthday now. Midnight had slipped us by. I mumbled happy birthday at him, gave him a quick kiss, then rolled over again. But it wasn't that simple. Nothing was going to be that simple tonight. 'Cause drunken badger Luke, he had a question for me. It was a big one. Jesus. I swear I didn't mean to start anything. Not now. Not like this, on his fucking birthday of all things, but shit, Luke. Ask a coked-up autistic a big question, and you'd better be prepared for the answer. It wasn't the question you think. You know, the will you marry me one? But it might as well have been. For us, in our 20s, it might as fucking well have been. Luke's big question was every bit as intense, serious, and ultimately final. I didn't even catch what he said the first 3 times. He was so drunk and slurry, but regardless, as drunk people tend to, Luke couldn't just drop it. Unwisely, he persisted, enunciating like I was foreign. Do you think I'm the one? The one, with a capital O, my forever boy, the diamond in the mine, our whole lives leading up to that very same diamond resting on my finger. He was smiling, my drunken badger Luke, as he asked this question. I guess turning 28 was making him think hard about the future, and I was in it, undoubtedly, pen and ink. It was my own birthday just a week later, and I came to learn he was planning to take me to Italy, in a sweeping romantic gesture that would have blown my 20-year-old mind to smithereens. You know, the really shit thing is, if he'd saved that question, asked it there, half sober, in the romantic paradise of an Italian sunset, just the two of us, for once, for fucking once, what would my answer have been? 'Cause Luke and I were never just a couple. It was always Luke and me and 50 friends, and it was a riot. But how do you brew any romance, any true love for each other without one-on-one time? So what if? What if we had made it to Italy? Would everything have been different? Maybe. Maybe not. I was so young, my eating disorder had stunted me in an eternally teenage mindset. I was more 17 than 20, and who the hell knows who the one is at 17? So it wasn't Italy, the place we decided our fate. It was 5 a.m. in a darkened bedroom, party people crashing wildly about outside, me trying to sleep, all my neurons firing icily on maximum bastard cocaine, and now Luke, still smeared with black and white grease paint, barely able to stand upright, had chosen this very place and time to pop the question. "Do you think I'm the one?" he repeated. "And if you're neurotypical, I fucking bet you know the right answer. The thing I should have said. It goes, Luke, we're both wasted and half asleep. That's a huge question, and I can't brain well enough to answer it right now. So happy birthday, Badger Boy. Let's do this over breakfast, okay? We'll go somewhere nice, somewhere with bacon, right? Now let me sleep, please." That is what I should have said. It's definitely what I wish I'd said. But you and I both know, if you're autistic and barely more than a kid, you don't think about the timing, about the fallout, about anything. You just answer the damn question, make him drink it straight up with all the innocent murderousness of a child's raw honesty. "Am I the one?" he said, again, still smiling. "No," I stated, cocaine logic making the word come out almost humorous, as though the very suggestion was ridiculous. I'd never even said an "I love you." That wasn't something I would ever lie about. So why would he be the one? I didn't even have to think on my answer, and drunk as he was, Luke picked up on that in a heartbeat. "No hesitation," he said, shaking his head, gobsmacked. "You didn't even have to think about it, did you?" And right then, that's when the coke seized hold of my neurons and the booze seized hold of his. And this is precisely the fucking problem with being around someone who's operating on a totally different drug, Luke. He was 100% raw emotion. I was 100% icy logic. He needed to know, now, right now, what the problem was, how to fix it, what my ideal man looked like. Fuck the timing, fuck the party crashing on outside. We needed to do this, all of this, right here and now. And I was so coked off my box, the furthest words from my mind were, "Let's not talk now. All anyone can do on coke is talk." So I stared up at the ceiling, didn't even look him in the eye as I discussed it all like a scientific theorem I was lecturing on, explaining that I'd like somebody nearer my age, a vegetarian or vegan, a fellow pillhead and psychonaut, somebody who wanted to explore their own inner space the way I did every single weekend, someone less serious about life and the future and all those grown-up things I wasn't ready for and didn't find interesting at all. Luke became bitingly bitter as he realized there was no way on earth for him to become this person, to rewind the clock and be that younger, more naive boy I needed. He snapped out that he hoped me and my unemployed, lentil-munching hippie boyfriend had fun dwelling in fucking poverty together then, but he apologized profusely 10 seconds later. I could never quite tell where Luke ended and the darkness inside him began. The way he could swing from compassion to outright meanness in the blink of an eye. "This is the end, then," he said, at last, his voice breaking. "What?" I said, frowning, genuinely bemused enough to actually look him in the eye now. "Why does it matter that you're not the one? We have fun together. It doesn't matter that it's not forever." I think he actually ruffled my hair at that point. The age difference was just so stark there were no words left. Luke was staring down 30. There was no time left for a relationship with no future. His friends were popping out babies already, and there was no way in hell Luke was ever not going to be a dad. You should have seen him with those babies. I always hated kids, but he'd make me hold them regardless, even take pictures of us together sometimes. Me, him, his friends, and their borrowed baby sitting in my lap, just to try it out, see how we'd fit someday on a Christmas card snap of our little family. This is why I wonder, now and then, who I'd be, where I'd be, if it weren't for this one stupid night. Luke made things happen. He made things manifest. Around him, around his friends, I could even see myself in that role, baby and all. In truth, there was no room for the real me in that relationship. No room to grow and explore and become who I was meant to be. If we'd stayed together, I doubt I ever would have written a word. Luke was the great shaper of people, and I was just too young, too immature to be with someone who'd already found the shape of the life they wanted. But if I'd stayed, let Luke shape me into what he needed, it would have been as easy as falling in a way. So would I be happy now in that life with Luke's kid? Or would we be bitterly divorced, just another mini Luke in the world, blossoming darkly in the shadows of all that hatred? I suspect the latter, but the former still tempts my imagination, just now and then. Now and then. Of course it's the end, said Luke, and then he was crying. I just carried on staring up at the ceiling, too coked up to even know what an emotion was. Shall I sleep on the sofa? I asked, deadpan. No, please, stay. So I stayed. He zonked out. I didn't. When dawn filtered through the thin curtains, Luke woke upset and told me he'd had the worst dream in the entire world, this awful, awful dream that we'd broken up, and it had seemed so real. He begged me to reassure him that it wasn't true, was it? It couldn't be true. Holy fucking shit, you have got to be joking, I thought. You were genuinely too drunk to even remember that conversation. And now I've got to do it all over again on a sodding come down. Which is precisely what happened. Near enough word for word. Tear for tear. So I didn't just dump him on his birthday. I did it twice. I always point out the fact that I never started this damn conversation, that his question just backed me into a corner, but, well, when one person's deadpan and the other's in bits, you always know who's really the dumper and the dumpy, no matter how it went down. So I packed my stuff, loaded the car, and drove out into the dim grey morning light, meeting a couple of Luke's mates at a Kings Heath petrol station to collect the drug money they owed me. We'd arranged to do it later, over our usual pizzas, but of course that was over now. It didn't really hit me till a day or two later, but when it did, I was so upset the only thing I could do was call Luke. He invited me over. I cried all over him, but he saw straight to the truth of it. It sounds like you miss my friends more than you miss me. He wasn't exactly wrong, but he wasn't quite right either. Luke was his friends. He was the nucleus that held this giant, fantastic atom together, and it was so warm and exciting and beautiful inside that atom. I missed being there. I wasn't in love with the nucleus, but I adored the atom, and Luke was its soul. That's how I felt, in truth, but see, even 16 years later, it makes for a horribly messy metaphor. How was I meant to explain all that back then? We went bowling, just the two of us, then Luke brought me home. Well, his home, but it still felt like home to me, my eyes all red and squinty with tears. We had a midweek pizza Sunday with all his friends, who miraculously didn't seem to hate me. I guess Luke's affinity for younger, visibly damaged girls must have yielded messy situations before. They always say, don't stick your dick in crazy, but there's no clever little motto, no handbook for what you do when you actually end up falling in love with the crazy. Anyway, after that, I became Luke's not exactly girlfriend. Just the same as I'd been Ash's not exactly girlfriend after we broke up. Luke said he was worried I'd stop eating again, without his influence, or at least that was his cover story. I think it was just too comfortable for both of us, staying together. So I came to parties with him, and we shared a bed. Sometimes we kissed, but we never had sex again, until finally Luke gave up on the whole ruse and moved away, just upped and left us all to start a new life in London. The nucleus of our party scene was gone. Little by little the group splintered, grew calmer, more reserved. The parties got rarer until pretty soon I was stuck back in my shithole town, exactly like it had been when I was a teenager. The goth scene was still pumping, of course. There were events every weekend, bigger ones every month, but I didn't have Luke to get ready with, to drive in with, to crash over all weekend and eat pizzas with. Going out was the same isolating, bleak, drugged-up mess it had always been. Just me driving the 20-mile round trip in my little green Clio all by myself, then coming home to party alone in my bedroom. Without Luke and Luke's friends and our routine of coked-up poker games and Angel and pizza Sundays, a gaping void opened up in my life. And, well, if you've been listening, if you know me at all by now, I was never going to fill it with yoga or rock climbing or guitar lessons or anything healthy, was I? It was always just an opportunity for a fresh form of self-destruction to set in. I was done with my eating disorder, though. Been there, done that, nearly died of boredom as much as anything. However, there was one desire that I'd had since the age of 12. One twisted fascination born of a young adult novel about kids every bit as bored and messed up as me. Junk. That book, that quote about intravenous heroin. You could be sitting in a sewer on junk and you'd still feel like the happiest man alive. I'd taken that to heart the minute I read it one Christmas holiday circa 1997, listening to Radiohead's OK Computer, painting my hair with magenta hair mascara, my fingers twinkling with Tammy Girl nail polish. My life felt like a fucking sewer, and now here was this book, this beautiful neon green monolith of a book overflowing with secrets and answers. Needles, heroin. I wanted to try it all. I'd been so young back then, only 12. I had no idea where to score smack or even needles, but now it was 2006. I was a fucking adult. And better still, I had the internet. You can find anything on the internet if you know where to look. So, are you ready for the next secret? The next plunge of the roller coaster? There must have been a part of me that knew it was a terrible idea, but I always used to call it the speed of inevitability. There are some decisions you just can't put off or say no to. Inevitability itself drags you there like the click, click, click of roller coaster wheels going up, up, up to a drop you never really wanted to go down. The view at the top is spectacular, just for an instant, and then you're falling, dropping like a nightmare. Only nothing wakes you up. And that's where we're leaving it for this chapter ending, which is super uplifting. It's weird looking back on a relationship that you know is one of those points where you can look back in your life and you can really see this was such a fork in the road. Like if you'd stayed with this person, your life would have been so different, because he was such a shaper of people. Like he had such big, compassionate ideas about what I should do and what I should do with my life and what he was going to do with his life and how our lives were going to look and all of this. He was so good at bringing people together and so good at creating scenes and parties and good times. And I feel like I would have had the most incredibly fun life with him in general, despite the fact that he had this incredibly dark side too, which mostly came out when he was drunk or just pissed off or just in a bad place. And yeah, the last time I saw him, his life has gone in a very good direction since the last time I saw him, and I'm sure he feels like sunshine and puppies to be around these days. But the last time I saw him, his vibe was so dark. I couldn't deal with being around him at all. It was just, oh man, you used to have a bit of this going on, and now it's like I'm not someone who sees auras or generally feels this stuff off of human people, but I could feel it with him. I could feel like, whoa, like, okay, I know you've got this dark past and this way of making things manifest even when you're not trying to. If someone pisses you off, something will fucking happen to them. I swear he's got some kind of gift that he doesn't know about and he doesn't acknowledge, and he doesn't have the beliefs to acknowledge, but it's just someone you don't want to mess with, because something will happen to you. He won't make it happen by himself, but it will fucking happen. It's interesting. So he has this really dark side too, but at the same time, I feel like he was so good at creating a fun vibe around people. Like people were just so drawn to him. Much as he could manifest dark things, he could also manifest very, very light things too. That, you know, if he was in a good mood and he was happy, like, people were just drawn to him. His parties, like, everyone came to them, and it just seemed to require no effort on his part to get things to happen and to be around. And for me, like, I'm someone who, I don't celebrate my own birthday. Not really. I don't have birthday parties because I hate being the center of attention. I've never had an adult party in my life. Like, I wouldn't know how to begin. I'd be terrified being the center of things, whereas he was so good at that stuff. And if I'd stayed at his side the whole time through my life and just stayed in that nucleus, you know, stayed next to the nucleus of this big party happy atom, I think life would have been such an amazing adventure with him. And it sucks, to be honest. It sucks being a grey sexual person who falls out of attraction with someone and who, like, say that his reputation from the beginning had been like, he's a fuckboy, don't develop feelings for him. So I put him in that category. I put him in the bro zone. It wasn't quite the friend zone, because it was like, yeah, we're gonna fuck and stuff, but it was the bro zone. It was like fuck buddy zone. Don't have feelings for him. You can be attracted to him, but don't have feelings for him. And once he was in that zone, he couldn't come out of it. I couldn't do it. Once it was like, oh shit, you're serious here? You're serious? Too late, man. Too late. I can't turn it around. I can't develop these feelings now. So, yeah, I would say, fuckboys of the world, if you ever find yourself in a relationship with someone and you start feeling feelings for them, you might want to make that clear quite early on, because particularly if they're a bit autistic, you might want to make it clear so that they have a chance to develop feelings at the same rate, because otherwise, if you get bro zoned, there's no coming back from that. There just isn't. So that was kind of where it all went wrong. But at the same time, do I? Because, like, say, I would be someone completely unrecognizable if we'd stuck together. I would undoubtedly have a kid by now, because he was the shaper of people. And around him, the idea of having kids, it was like, okay, this is what people do, and why not? Even though all my life I've been like, why the fuck does anyone have kids? I hate kids. I never want to do this. It's like the number one thing I never want to do. You might as well put me in jail as give me a kid. I'm sure if we'd stuck together, I would have one by now. I don't think that would go great, realistically speaking. But around him and around this fucking superpower he had to make people into what he needed them to be, maybe it would have gone fine. I don't know. It's interesting. It's one of these fascinating points for me to, like, look back on and just think this is such a fork in the road, because, you know, as I hinted towards the end of this, where things went after Luke went down to London and I was left to my own devices again, well, I didn't go in such a great direction. So where would things have gone otherwise? Who knows? We will never know. Maybe you do. Maybe when you die, someone is able to show you, like, the sliding doors version of your life. Here's where everything would have gone if you hadn't have made these decisions. Who knows? But anyway, yes, as I say, if you want the next chapter early, it will be on my Patreon, link below, $2. Get you in. And with that said, I'm going to shut up because I am losing my voice. But thanks for listening. And if you've ever been with a fuckboy who ended up getting serious, what happened? Were you able to get serious with them too? Did it turn into an amazing thing? How did it go for you? Or are you also someone who puts people in the bro zone and there's no coming back from that? I don't know. But tell me your fuckboy experiences, particularly the unpredictable ones. I'm going to shut up now. Over and out. Bye-bye.